Good to
Hey,
see you, Micah.
we are
Nat
now.
Galson. Very nice.
So we are recording now. It's Vince Cerf speaking. We'll convene the meeting as of March 15th, 10:34 Eastern Daylight Time. And again, I want to draw your attention to the agenda, which is in the chat that Maylin just put up. And you'll note an extraordinarily broad range of topics to be discussed. I think what we're looking for, at least what I'm looking for, are concrete things that we can do to make the notion of digital cooperation real and successful. And in the conversations that we've had in the past, we've uncovered a number of opportunities where different parties can cooperate, whether it's broadly and at a multilateral level, or in some cases it might be an individual company or even an individual person taking an action that assists us in the creation of a safer and more secure and more useful internet and more accessible and more sustainable and all those other wonderful words. So that's what we're going to try to extract from the conversation today. Maylin, I don't know if you want to add something to that before we begin with Ray Wang's presentation. Maylin?
Let's just go with Ray's. There's quite a broad range of information that's going to be presented today, and we'll be able to talk about it a little later in the program. So go ahead, Ray. Ray Wang. It's wonderful. Ray, go ahead.
Hey, no problem. Hi. Yeah, so welcome, everybody. I'm just going to spend a little time talking about what data-driven digital transformation looks like. And I'm not going to use any slides intentionally, just so that the conversation carries a lot easier. But one of the stats that we see all the time is the fact that transformation has occurred. And we're seeing it happen in terms of this kind of statistics. 63% of the Fortune 500 have been merged, acquired, gone bankrupt, and fallen off the list. And there's a amount of transformation that's occurring. It's not just about what people consider digital channels. There's a lot going on in the background. It's about digital business models, and it's also about digital monetization. And as you all know, that monetization starts with data. And that data today is free. It's being mined. It's being taken away from individuals. It's not necessarily their data. And that data itself is actually the raw material that's being used to create all these new types of businesses. Now, what are these types of businesses that are being created? Well, you can see it happen in digital monetization. Digital monetization happens in goods that are being sold. You see that in companies like Roblox with children's games. You can buy attire, you can buy items. It's in services when we actually see that in software and subscriptions or in subscriptions for data streaming. And it's also in memberships. You belong to something. You belong to a club or a group. And of course, you see it in advertising as well as search. Now, what's interesting about this is that a lot of this data and a lot of this data-driven transformation that's happening is actually creating something different. It's creating a category of companies we call digital giants. And these digital giants operate a little bit differently. These digital giants have understood that there are 7 factors that are required to be successful. And that first factor is you have to reinvent how an organization is going to be successful. And that really goes back to understanding your mission, your purpose. It's thinking about your business model, thinking about your finance. How do you get there? But that's just one of many factors. The second one really relies on the power of networks. And this is where you want to figure out where you want to build the biggest network that's out there. And we're talking 50 million users, 100 million users. We're talking 50 million devices, 100 million devices. And it's not just individuals, it's the individuals and the networks that actually create this. And I'll give you some examples in a little bit. The third part is a little bit different. It's about owning the customer relationship, but it's also disintermediating the relationship of others' customers so that it's aggregated onto your platform. And then the fourth piece is the part that we're talking mostly about is competing for data supremacy. The ability to actually win on data and build a competitive advantage and flywheel built on that data platform. And then, of course, it's about deploying monetization models. And actually, yeah, if you think about the monetization models, we talked through ads, search, subscriptions, memberships, what actually happens in terms of goods and services. And then the sixth piece is how do we build joint venture models to actually partner to build those types of networks, share that kind of data to be successful, and then take a long-term growth mindset, which is really about building the infrastructure required, whether it's the sharing of the data, whether it's the privacy of that information, whether it's the regulations that are required to ensure free and fair markets, and also how to build out that infrastructure as you accumulate those networks. And so an example of how this kind of works would be, to give you an idea of how you'd build a data-driven network, you'd start focusing on where and how you actually bring that data together. Now, why is that important? Well, one of the areas where we see these three areas come together is really in analytics, automation, and AI. The analytics aspect helps us bring the information that we need together. The automation helps us collect that information at a rapid pace. And the AI helps us build those learning models over time. And when we bring those three things together, those three A's are what powers these data platforms. Now, I'm going to give you a consumer example of kind of how this works. But the idea here is to build what we call the business graph. Now, why is that important? Because humans make one decision per second. It takes us 6 weeks, if we're lucky, to get something out of management committee. Machines are making decisions 1,000 times per second. That creates an asymmetry in terms of decisions, right? And that's what we're trying to figure out is how do we get to that level of decision velocity? Or can we make repeatable decisions at a more rapid pace so that we can use them going forward to build out better business graphs or the understanding of what might happen, where that prediction might take place going forward. Now, I'll give you an example of this monetization model that could happen. And I'm going to use a consumer example to show you how all 7 of these pieces come together. And Vint might kill me because I'm using an example using blockchain, but that's okay. So I'll tell you that early. But here's an interesting thought process. I know I've just been shot. But here's an example of why. So about 4 years ago, I really wanted to buy Air Canada's mileage program. And you're like, why would you want to do that? And Air Canada's mileage program was running for about $400 million, but it has 10 million flyers. And those 10 million flyers are in what we call a cross-border tax-free value exchange. And the interesting thing about that is the fact that it's not just about Air Canada's membership that's important. It's part of the Star Alliance network, which has 740 million flyers. Now, if you know anything about airline miles, they're funded a penny a mile, but they're redeemed anywhere between 1.6 cents and 2.5 cents a mile. And what that means is, they don't lose money, but airlines hate airline loyalty programs because it's a liability on their books and it makes them look bad. But imagine if you cryptocurrencyed the airline program, you're funded at a penny a mile. So there is something there. So it's not empty. You're not making it up out of nowhere. And what you suddenly have is the ability to redeem miles and transfer and create the world's largest fiat currency overnight. 720 million members using a mileage program to transact with each other, which means you collapse the industries of travel, retail, media and entertainment, and financial services all into one uniform network that anybody can easily access to be able to transact on a currency basis. So you could pay the farmer in Africa like a penny for their crops or $15 for the crops using mileage points. You could buy something from a craft store in Eastern or Western Australia, right? You could actually do something with, transactions for telecom. You could do transactions for retail, and everybody has the same currency and it's backed, and now it reaches a broader audience, right? And we're going to see things like this over time because the decentralization of finance, decentralization of transactions, all relies on standards, all relies on a regulatory principle, and all relies on operating models that actually allow people to cooperate. And airline mileage programs are a great example because all those value exchange systems, the trading networks already exist. The only difference is I just turned that into a cryptocurrency that now anybody can use. And now people can buy into that currency so that other folks can now participate, right? The network is there, the model's there, the regulations are there. You don't even have to do as much as you had to before. So this is an example of where we see these types of data-driven digital networks pop up, and more importantly, the type of cooperation we're going to need going forward with standards if we're going to try to improve inclusivity and also improve opportunities. The more we can rip out the barriers that are there, and the more that we rethink where regulations have a place and don't have a place, that's where we're going to see opportunities. Now, there is a danger on the other end, and that's really making sure that these platforms are operated by individuals that have a benevolent purpose, that have some control systems that are there. So for example, if the platform becomes too big and I can't have competitors on that platform, or I restrict access to them, then I'm going to have to think about where those models occur. Now, at least in airline miles, there's an international body governing that, which is IATA, and there are other folks that are working through those exchanges that have different rules and regulations at both the country level and at the state level. Think about the same way as you look at telecom standards and what's required. Maybe one of the areas are going to be how we actually transact in terms of a value exchange. Money or points or other mechanisms can be built into the future set of standards, can improve that digital cooperation and be done at a global level. Now, there's going to be a lot of competition. There'll be a lot of lobbying against that because you're about to disrupt the global financial system. You're about to disrupt how people actually, transact and collect taxes. But I think those are slight barriers for you to think about, because tax collection is something that can be done on the systems pretty easily. More importantly, just going up against the banking lobby. That's the harder part. But that's an example of what it is. I know there was only 10 minutes to do that. And so I'll just close out with a couple of things to think about. The largest part of where these data-driven digital networks are going to pop up in the future is going to be in companies that understand these networks. You see them today. You see them with the Airbnbs, the DoorDashes. You see them happening with the Coupongs of the world that just went public. You see them happening with companies that have these big networks. Those networks are the flywheel. Those networks are what provide their ability to think about the next best action. How do I price something? What supply chains look like, right? And the ability to actually have people participate in as many of these networks is what's going to improve cooperation going forward. And it's also important for us to make sure that these markets are free and fair, which means there's also improved access and improved opportunities for people to deliver on innovation. And so you're going to see all these things come together. And that's in a book I'm writing that comes out on July 13th. So happy to share more. So thanks a lot for having me here.
Wow, very impressive to get that down to 10 minutes, Ray. I'm very impressed. One question for you. My understanding of that example is that using the airline miles as a medium of transaction does not remove the liability from the airline, because the miles are still valid as the people are exchanging things, but it's creating a peculiar kind of currency out of this, which is different from the fiat currencies that one normally expects. My understanding is that legally there are constraints, and I didn't think they were purely IATA, under IATA control. I think there may be some other financial rules about what you can do with things like this in terms of volatility of value and cashing in. Let's see if I can think of it. Yes. Okay. So American Express does the same thing. They have purchases that you earn points for, and the points can be turned into
legally, they have to redeem them back at a penny a mile. However, if you decide to redeem a first class ticket, it's 2.5 cents. If you buy the magazine, it's 5 cents a mile. And if you do what I do by accident, is buy golf clubs or electronics, it's 10 cents a mile. So the redemption rates change depending on how you purchase, and most people don't do the conversion rates. So if you're spending more than $400 for 25,000 miles on a ticket, use the mileage.
So I have 2.75 million miles on United right now. Maybe I'll go back and have a look at what I can do with that. Thanks so much, Ray, for giving us some interesting ideas all of a sudden. Our next speaker on the agenda is Doreen Bogdan. I hope Doreen is there. It looks like she might have dialed in.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Hi there. Hi, Vint. Hi, Mei-Ling. Nice to see everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Vint, you asked us to talk about concrete things. So normally I join you to talk about the digital cooperation roadmap. I would simply say that the work in connectivity and in capacity building is advancing, and I hope that for the next call we can give you more info on the baseline metrics work that we're doing in that context. But today I wanted to share with you an update on the WSIS process, the WSIS forum. Some of you, like me, have been there from the beginning, from 2003, when we had the first summit. Maylin, can you go to the next slide? So this process is a process that's led by 32 UN agencies, which makes it quite unique, I would say. Can we go to the next slide? I'm just going to whiz through the slides here. In terms of the timeline.
Doreen,
Yeah.
it's Vint. I need to interrupt. Maylin, can you put this in presentation mode? Because right now you're in edit mode and it's not really readable, at least not on my screen.
Present. Okay.
If you could present, yes, that's better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so the initiative really came about in 1998, and then we had our two phases in 2003, 2005. We had our action lines, and the summit rollout process began. Of course, the IGF and the WSIS Forum were two concrete resulting processes that were put in place by the member states to ensure that the decisions of the two summits were actually being implemented. And it's hard to believe that we will soon be coming up to the 20th anniversary of the WSIS Forum. Next slide. The process has evolved together with the MDGs and then eventually with the SDGs. And we really do see the WSIS process as sort of a key enabling framework to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide. So the outcomes. Yeah, and so I just wanted to quickly recap, because some of you joined us last year, the outcome slide, Maylin.
Okay. No. Sorry.
That's okay, you're going ahead, but
but here we go.
Stay there just for a second. Yeah. So last year we were impacted by COVID, as was everyone else. We moved online, and we had, I think, quite a great success with 160 sessions. It ran for some 12 weeks. We had 15,000 attendees, and it was really a good opportunity to get to many audiences that were not able to traditionally connect to WSIS discussions. So I think that was a good outcome. Next slide. So what I really wanted to focus on today was just to give you some highlights of what to expect this year. Sorry, Maylin, back to slide 6 is the one we should be on.
I don't know what I'm doing that's making it do this. So
no worries. Actually, what we can do is just share the slide deck afterwards. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Doreen, it's Vint. Maylin, what's happening is that you seem to be clicking on the little triangle, which causes it to go automatic. And you don't do that. So if you want to use your left and right arrow keys on your keyboard, you may be able to control it better.
Okay, will do.
Okay, so I just wanted to say a few words about WSIS Forum 2021. So of course we've maintained the virtual mode. We kicked off actually in January, and it's going to conclude in May. So we're now in week 8 of the WSIS Forum. We're planning to have some 300 workshops. I think, Vint, you were in one of them last week. So the theme is on inclusive, resilient, and sustainable societies, which is of course quite relevant in light of COVID. We have different thematic tracks. So last week we had the special focus on gender on the occasion of International Women's Day, with many sessions there. This week we're kicking off the ICTs for well-being. Actually, it kicked off today, and happiness. We also kicked off the ICTs and accessibility track. Next week we kick off the high-level pieces. That's where we have our high-level facilitators. And some of you, I think, that are with us today have participated in nominating those high-level facilitators. So thank you for that. And then future tracks will cover emerging technologies. We'll have an older person's track, a youth track, a cybersecurity track, and things will wrap up the week of the 17th of May, which is the special week for the ITU, as it's the anniversary of the creation of the ITU on the 17th of May. So really an exciting program, I would say, for this year. And I invite you to join us for that. If we can, Mei-Ling, I'll try to stick with the slides quickly. I just wanted to mention, Mei-Ling, you asked us to share, because a lot of people don't know this. We actually have a UN group on the Information Society. It was created back in 2005. So it brings together the UN agencies to follow the UN WSIS process from the UN perspective. So that group regularly meets. Next slide. We have our COVID response actions, of course, that we started last year, and we will continue this year. We have different talks. We have our ICT case repository, which has compiled a wealth of information. Next slide. So in the final week of the WSIS Forum in May, we will have our stock taking report released, the success stories released, and the update on the repository. Next slide. Something that gets lots of attention are the WSIS prizes. So we had this record number of submissions, almost 1,300 submissions. That was came down to 360 after being vetted. Those nominees, the 360 nominees, you can vote. So you can go online and vote for your favorite prize. I would encourage you to do that as well. Next slide. I think I'll skip that one. And of course, there's the next one, social media channels, where you can follow the sessions live and follow basically what's happening on the WSIS front. So I'll perhaps pause there on the WSIS front. I think many of you follow it already. It is a good opportunity to share practices, to come together, even though it's virtual. So please do join us. I also wanted to share one other piece of information, and I'll put the link in the chat. The program for the President of the General Assembly's high-level thematic debate on digital cooperation and connectivity is now out. So that event will take place on the 27th of April. So if you're interested, the program's up, and I would invite you at least to follow it, because it will be webcast and it will also be on UN TV. But simply to say, as you all know, the digital cooperation issues and the connectivity issues remain at the top of the UN agenda, from the roadmap to the PGA interest to the WSIS Forum, and of course to our own, I'll do publicity as I always do for the World Telecommunications Development Conference that will happen later this year. So plenty of opportunities, Vint. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to seize what's out there and continue to work together in a multi-stakeholder way. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Doreen. Wow, you packed a lot into a few minutes' time. If we aren't reinventing wheels, at the very least, we should make more of them so that things will work more smoothly. Speaking of which, Nitin Bhajatia is yes. Next on the agenda, speaking on global public utility for SME financing. And those are, the SMEs are in fact wheels of many societies in terms of GDP enhancement. So Nitin, the floor is yours.
Excellent, thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm going to just put up a couple of slides as I walk through this. I think continue on, I'm trying to get to my, Mei-Ling, if you wouldn't mind putting them up. I think you've got, I sent you an updated copy. I'm having a bit of a challenge here with the Google Meet. Yeah, it says can't share screen.
Mei-Ling, becoming an expert in Google Meet.
And so there's one slide that's not on Mei-Lin's that I'll talk to later. But essentially, myself, Mei-Lin, and a gentleman by the name of Sean Flynn have been thinking about what it means to extend lending to small and medium enterprises, around the world. Well, one of the great realizations that we've had is that the topmost of society, the biggest companies on the planet today, trade on intangible assets. What that says is that things that are not physical can be valued. And if they can be valued, then why can't they be valued for the bottom of society who may not own physical assets at all, but instead have know-how, they have skills, they have connections that matter. And so this is a slow but still rather sudden transition in the way the valuations happened. Mei-Lin, next slide, just so we can put into some context where this thinking is coming from. As early as 1975, the biggest companies on planet Earth, public valuations are based off of tangible assets. One could argue that IBM actually was worth more than that because it's intangible. Its know-how had value, but there was no way for finance to really understand, recognize, and model for that. That's no longer the case. And I don't think there's a single person on the planet today that would say that the sum total of Apple's buildings and factories and inventory would equal its net value. Its net value is really tied to intangible assets. The intangible assets that most publicly traded companies trade on fall into 8 different categories. And I'm going to read this actually from a slide that didn't make it into this presentation, but it's intellectual property, B2B rights or in contractual rights that they hold, the brand, in other words, the perception of the brand, hard intangibles such as, receivables and so forth, data, going back to what Ray, talked about, non-revenue rights, relationships, and public access rights. Those 8 things formulate the intangible assets that today create over $25 trillion worth of value at the topmost of society. Next slide. So let's take that and let's put that into the use case of Mariana. Mariana today, is paying upwards of 30 to 40% interest to run her push cart because the only thing that the lender will value are the physical assets that she has, which are her push cart, which may not hold value. Her value is her connections. She's on a phone. She knows people. Her value is her know-how, her ability to present and create, opportunity, whether by bringing to market unique food, bringing to market other capabilities. What you'll notice here is the challenge it presents to her is that her push cart is also not only how she earns her living, but it's also her nursery, in the sense that her child has to come with her. This is a added level of complexity. So what we've been thinking about is, how do you make what is well understood at the topmost of society, which is data-driven understanding of what intangible assets be valued at. How do you spread that in a world that'll be digitally connected, where literally every aspect of society can be monitored, maintained, and managed? How do you spread that out? Well, the area that Sean, myself, and Mei-Lin have been thinking about has been building a digitally enabled public utility for underwriting. At the heart of all finance is this notion of underwriting. Informal underwriting we've had as humans, for time immemorial. It is socially understood norms about lending money and having it returned to you. Formal underwriting has existed in the banking world for a very, very long time. And that's really when a third party comes in and values the transaction and makes that transaction viable for both parties. What we're seeing with the emergence of models in China with the Ant Group is really a broker in between that can value that transaction across the board and make it scalable. And so I think the opportunity exists here for us to enable a digitally driven small medium enterprise underwriting facility that can be utilized to scale value to every aspect of society at scale. I'll pause there. I'm not sure where we are on time, but I think I've stayed pretty much to time.
Well, actually, you were literally smack on, actually a little short, in case you wanted to add one or two more sentences.
I think I'm good. I think, I just wanted to say we're obviously work in progress and would love feedback from everybody on how to make this happen.
So, Nitin, one of the things that you're doing, which I consider to be extraordinarily important, is to create the conditions in which people like this pushcart vendor can thrive. And so this notion of creating the conditions that are needed is as important as the actual funding for them. And so this is a good example of a preamble. A lot of you have experienced the situation where in order to do something, you discover you have to do something else first. These are all enabling kinds of actions. And so this is just as concrete as anything else I can think of. Well, now we're going to switch to a topic of great interest to me, and I hope the rest of you, from Maria Dayton, and that's citizen journalism and Transterra Media. Journalism is in trouble, I think, as many of you have discovered, and I hope Maria has some ideas for repairing the damage. Maria, the floor is yours.
We can't hear you, Maria.
I hear you, Maria. You're muted. You need to unmute. If you move your cursor to pop up the control bar at the bottom of the screen and then click on the little thing that looks like a microphone. There we go. You're in. No, now you're still muted.
Sorry about that. There we go. Okay.
Now you're good. Now you're good. Go ahead, Maria.
All right, great. So are you guys, you're seeing my screen, right? All good?
We're
okay,
not
great.
on the screen. You need, when you click on present now, you should select what it is you want to present. Is it a tab on the browser? Is it a window?
Yeah, no, I'm doing that. I'm not sure why it's not doing it.
It disappeared, Maria. I think do it again.
Huh. Okay. Can you see it now?
We're still not seeing what you have on your screen.
1 second.
While Maria is fiddling with that, I just wanted to say I am delighted to introduce her. She began life as a speechwriter for Boutros Ghali, the UN Secretary General, and has really gone into media in a big way. So really excited to have her present to us. Go ahead, Maria. We can see it.
You're
Okay.
now presenting, Maria.
Thanks. I had to exit out. So thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk to you about citizen journalism and my company, Transterra Media, as Malin mentioned. My contacts are there if anyone wants to speak more later or ask questions or cooperate. We're always up for cooperation. So, so I entitled this presentation, and I'll try to be quick, so I'll move quickly through the slides, is the future of citizen journalism, where the democratization of narrative, capital, and data converge. And I know that's kind of like a complex, jargony statement, but I really believe that if we can figure out how to deal with these networks that are digitally connected of freelancers and citizen journalists around the world, not only can we figure out how to create sort of grassroots driven storytelling, but we can de-risk capital, we can increase investor confidence, and we can diversify our data sets, which we know are critical. And to be honest with you, we don't really know if we can achieve all of that, what is possible, especially if we're talking about digital cooperation or infrastructure. If we can de-risk these investments by providing the information and to build the trust that investors need, there's really, the sky's the limit in terms of what can be achieved. So what I thought today is I would just go over quickly kind of a little bit about myself, and then the origins of Transtera, and then the problems that we're trying to solve, and then end with sort of the fun part, which is I think what's possible in the future based on kind of the work that's already been done, not just by us, but also by others. This quote I love, which I put up there: data are just summaries of thousands of stories. Tell a few of those stories to help make the data meaningful. And for me, this is, we basically need to get better at storytelling within every sector, and we need to get better at data. And like I said, create more inclusive data frameworks. And like I said, I think there's a long tradition in the news and media sector that we all can learn from. And like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just layering sort of technological capabilities on top of what already exists. So this is the website. We've been around since 2011. You can kind of get an idea just from our tagline, your world, your story. So we do brand storytelling to feature news, on-demand visual content from filmmakers, photo and video journalists in 123 countries. So, like I said, we started in 2011. As Malin mentioned, I came out of the UN system. I was working with Boutros Boutros-Ghali as he was rolling out of the Secretariat into UNESCO. And I kind of started working mostly with networks of civil society groups, mostly North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia, and was very interested in kind of how they were cooperating together. At that time, social media was kind of coming onto the scene. And what I was noticing more and more is that their stories were not really being told, in the global kind of landscape. So that's what we're really trying to do with Transtera, is create not just a technological integration with large media brands, but also building communities, training, all of the ecosystems that you would need to really allow local storytelling to take place. And again, remember, this is 2011, so this is 10 years ago. This gives a little bit of an overview of our story, just to give you context, and you'll see kind of how it evolved into what we're talking about today. So we started, like I said, from 2011 to 2016, working specifically in the news. So basically connecting, video, multimedia journalists and citizen journalists on the ground in, developing world with, BBC, CNN. And we did this exclusively until 2016, when the market kind of fell out of news and documentary internationally. So we needed to supplement in order to keep our networks kind of alive and able to sustain, their independence. So we started working in the brand space with Airbnb, Reebok. We do a ton of branded work just to supplement their income. So the journalists started doing brand on top of news and documentary. And then in 2018, we were approached by a large telecom operator that had a biz dev division, and they wanted to use our journalists to basically to verify market prices in Western African markets. So basically the prices of commodities, so like fruits and vegetables. And the price point was insane, right? So at that time, our eyes kind of opened in terms of what could be possible if we combined the financial services space with brand and with traditional news and documentary. And we could really give like a sustainable livelihood to these journalists all over the world that are really struggling. So this has been sort of our work over the last 2 years, and my work in particular, which is how I know a lot of you. So I got kind of involved in infrastructure funding and things like that based on some of these efforts. So we basically expanded our services at that time to financial due diligence, impact assessment evaluation, feasibility studies, site surveys, and third-party investment verification. And I added the awards that we've gotten over the last few years, not necessarily to brag, but to show the power of these networks and how sophisticated they are, because there's a lot of misconceptions about people on the ground, even the lowest level of citizen journalists. They're actually, extremely well-connected, talented people. So we've had 13 World Press Photo first prizes, 2 Emmys, 2 Peabodys, 1 Pulitzer, 4 Time Photos of the Year, 2 National Geographic Annual Awards. And this is just what I pulled up briefly. I'm sure there's more. Yeah, so ultimately, we've done 8,000 video stories with 280 content buyers. We've reached billions with 70% of profits returning to local producers. So we're really trying to get away, like I said, from the millions of engagement that you'll have from social media and expand it into a hybrid structure with technology that can really influence narrative, because that's what we're interested in doing. So really quickly, I know I'm moving fast, but you guys can review this later. You'll see from our mission, provide multiple revenue streams for local media creators to empower themselves, their communities, and build the strongest, most resilient network of content producers in the world. And this is really kind of our kind of 2018 on. This is what we're really passionate about doing, and if I would say are about maybe 40% in the process of doing that. So, and there's lots of other entities like us. So it's not just Transtera. I think this is just an example of what's possible, you know, in the space. So
Maria,
Yeah.
it's been, you have 14 slides and 3 minutes to go.
That's
So you
okay.
want to concentrate on the points that you want folks to take away.
Yeah, sure. I'll move quickly. There's only a couple more that are relevant.
Okay.
So just in short, as I mentioned, why citizen journalists? Like I said, they have the access, they have the time, they have the training, they have the technology. These networks are in need and under threat. And then also something to really reinforce, as I mentioned, this has been done for over 100 years. So it feels like something that's overwhelming in terms of getting content from the ground, but the news wires have been doing it, you know, since the 19th century. So we're just layering on technologies, you know, that basically facilitate, you know, the digital cooperation side of this. This is a little bit about the way that we vet our networks, which is pretty standard across the industry. At the top, you have kind of the award winners, international people, 5 stars. At the bottom, you have the kid with a camera, you know, and then you have different product sets for all of these groups. I think I mentioned some of the problems we were trying to deal with in terms of investment flows. You know, impact investment groups and infrastructure funds struggle with this. This is really important for last mile infrastructure and things like that, because the high risk profiles that come from last mile infrastructure are oftentimes due to a lack of information on the ground. So what we found, if you can do drone footage, site surveys, feasibility studies from locals with sentiment analysis in a way that these funds can understand, you can unlock capital. And that's what's really important, and tell stories at the same time. So they get kind of double for their money, sort of. These are some of the products and services. You can reference them back if you're interested, but I think I mentioned a lot of them. My conclusion is basically that we need to find new ways to collect and understand local insights and learn from the news and media sector. We need to allow all types of local stakeholders to participate. We need to go beyond the northern experts and code switchers, and ultimately we need to tell a story. These are some examples just from clients and people that we work with. That this is a impact investment fund out of San Francisco, and she says, as an innovative impact investment firm, we are constantly in need of better information from the ground on our direct investments. We're excited to work with Transtera Media to develop this space. But like I said, it goes beyond Transtera into just, you know, I think if we can all work collaboratively together, there's so much that we can do. There's more testimonials here. I wanted to jump just 1 minute into the future. And what I see is there's a process that we're developing that I think is really exciting, which is, you can see here, it's like an Uberized workflow on the project management side. So this is where everything is going, right? Where you're going to have multiple streams. You're going to have brand, financials, due diligence, all the different types, feasibility studies, market verification, popping up on people's phones. They can do it in real time. They can run, do the shoots, finish them. It's really an exciting space, especially with blockchain. Also on the rights management side, one of the big problems in this space is the ability to basically track who's doing what. And blockchain is the perfect way to do that. And it's really exciting. So we're developing this global content repository that'll be a nonprofit where anyone that's uploading like through a blockchain processor can basically make sure that their content is that basically their rights are protected, and that we can also track changes that are made. So this is really important for the deep fake space and stuff like that. So that's really exciting. Also real-time payments, which blockchain also enables, super exciting and a total game changer. So a lot of the sacred cows that we have in this space are imagining 30, 60, and 90-day timelines, even on influencer campaigns. So imagine a world where you have instantaneous payments going out internationally, like we've never seen a network like this. So this is what really excites me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. Sorry to cut you off. Maybe you'll be able to use airline miles as a medium of exchange when all this gets sorted out.
Maybe.
Yeah. So our next speaker is Mei Lin, well known to all of you, and this is on digital building blocks that enable local digital capacity. So Mei Lin, you have 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Maria, you'll have to stop presenting so that I can present.
Yes, there we go.
Okay. I think what Maria has shown is really how the world is changing, and I want to take us even further along where things are changing. Now I know how to present on Google Docs. Okay, is everybody seeing my screen?
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Okay, a big thing that we're trying to do in the digital cooperation and diplomacy network that this meeting is about is building digital capacity. And what this segment of the program is that I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes, maybe less, and then invite response from those people who are working on the digital building blocks to see what they make of this, these thoughts. So From the Periphery was a program that MJ Kochendorfer from Dial sent to me about a week ago. And this idea of this Friday song by 13-year-old Rebecca Black became the most watched YouTube video of 2011. And if you go there today, it has 151 million views. And the question that was asked in that program, which I'm happy to share if anybody wants it, was, can social contagion of this nature be harnessed to build a better world? And this picture of fireworks is that fireworks are where the sort of gunpowder, moves the heat from one to another, and things explode. They transfer over. But also, we have seen with COVID-19, now everybody really knows what viral spread means because we are living it. And so we know what viral spread is, and there are emerging models of how things spread through social media with influencers and super spreaders. That used to be a specialized term and that no longer is with COVID. Highly connected people in the social media world. And that Oprah Winfrey's first tweet actually helped the exponential growth of the Twitter platform. So I want to start on this slide in the left-hand side. What are strong social ties? People are connected, there's trust and intimacy. There's a foundation for cooperation or solidarity. So you're sort of starting to see where I'm going with, if we want to talk about digital cooperation, we've got to think about what is strong social ties. Information spreads through the strength of weak ties. And we've actually seen what's happened over the last 30 years with the internet, how strong weak ties are in spreading things. But the point I want to make here is that if we want to have sustainable digital capacity, we must engage our cultural roots. That there is no tree that can grow without its roots. And to some degree, what we've done with the weak social ties has led us to a somewhat fragile and brittle way of spreading information as well as building for the future. So I'm bringing the question, can we possibly do digital capacity building like a complex social contagion? And there is research into how complex contagion works, where it moves out. The whole thing about digital capacity building is it brings with it potential social risk. And when people are faced with potential social risk, many people will wait for others to adopt it first. Why should I take the risk? And if we want adoption, we need social reinforcement by networks. So the whole concept of strong social ties, for me, is critical for digital capacity building. And if anything we do with digital building blocks has to tie into that. And for things spreading, they need to see social proof. Are people like me, are people around me adopting it? So I'm putting forward this thesis that if we want to do digital capacity building in a way that reinforces our cultural roots, can we use common digital building blocks to help us do that? So I want to bring one example of a learning network for digital capacity building. The whole area of digital literacy is very complex. In fact, there's this whole hope for the one ring that binds them all, but in fact, there isn't. There's so many ways of measuring and tracking digital literacy and skills. And the idea of learning networks for digital capacity building is exemplified by the Digital Quotient Institute, which really has worked on tracking what is everybody doing and how does it compare and how can we in fact use all of these different measurements and work out what's useful within different communities. So what I'm driving is that we need to have strong ties and social reinforcement and recognize that people who are non-adopters are in fact the forces against adoption of digital capacity building. But what I'm talking about is digital capacity building that recognize what's culturally appropriate, what's context sensitive. And digital has the capacity to do that. We've just not demanded that of it. So I'm proposing that for digital capacity building, we have to do a social movement and use this idea of the tipping point. I'll share the slides, but this idea of the tipping point is that in a single community, once 25% do it, it reaches a tipping point and it starts to spread. And the biggest example of this, in fact, is how the internet itself spread from university to university via the National Research and Education Networks. The internet reached a tipping point and spread. So if we want to do digital capacity building, we have to spread it using some things that are a common language, and that common language can be digital building blocks that are then adapted by the local community to their own culture, but then having global exchange protocols. So with that, I'm going to stop. That's the concept. And I wanted to invite Martin from Estonia to perhaps make some remarks about what he's seen so far in this digital diplomacy and cooperation meeting, and specifically about this concept of digital building blocks and digital capacity building. Martin.
So hello from my side as well.
Yes.
Martin Gavats, National Digital Advisor for the Government of Estonia. Well, I really echo Mei-Lin's point on these building blocks, and also that, well, digitalization actually has got very little to do with technology and mostly to do with the mindset and the culture, something that goes between the ears somewhere here. And this is what also building digital society within Estonia has taught us, that it's mostly about building trust and community. And also perhaps a very good idea would be to also have a kind of a good value set and architectural way of thinking around that. One of the points that I would like to echo here is one of the initiatives that Estonia and then few of the others who are also participating. I see Kate Wilson from DIAL raising her hand, and there is people from GIZ and ITU, of course, is a project that we embarked with those same partners. And it also has actually, the baby got the name, and it's called GovStack. Govstack.global will be the domain, and then it's not open yet, but within this month we will launch the domain, and this is mainly about the work on those kind of building blocks that will become a digital public good and will be shareable. And they are meant in the very first case for governments. But what I've realized when working for the Estonian government is if many of the private sector initiatives are on this constant loop of attention economy, and the more you spend on their platform, the better. Then with governments, it's easy, and vice versa. The less hassle the less time you spend with the governments, the better it is. So the goal for the GovStack is to try to build a community around that, reusable, shareable, digital public good based building blocks, have a solid architectural approach to facilitate that, and hopefully help many of the different governments, because of course, with this COVID pandemic, probably most of you have realized that governance and public governance is the place that is lacking. Similar to the way that Harari was saying in Financial Times, we can beat the pandemic, but it's a question of policy and the quality of that policy. So I think many of the places of the world, public governance is something that can develop rapidly, and that we aim to do. And it's not only Estonia, we are getting many of the other different governments also involved, and we hope to actually go live within this year or maybe beginning of next year in several African countries, and hopefully get you guys all somehow participating in the GovStack, and hopefully we can prove that the solid architectural approach would work, to share those know-how and to share the experience. But thank you.
So it's Vint, Malin. Before you move on, I just wanted to make one observation about what Martin said. One of the things that Estonia does for us is demonstrate what's possible if 100% of the population can participate. It's a small enough country where you could actually make that assertion, whereas for larger countries, it's harder. But it points us at a goal. It says that if you could get to 100%, here are some things that you could do. This is another one of the enabling issues associated with digitization, and that's making sure that everybody can participate. I hope I haven't put words in Martin's mouth that he doesn't find tasteful, but it's intended as a compliment. Malin, do you want to go on now with MJ Kochendorfer?
Actually, it's Kate Wilson.
Okay.
Hi, thanks so much, Malin, for the great presentation. I could not agree more on kind of the analysis of basically why movements occur, and Martin sort of eloquently talked about sort of one area we're testing in terms of movements. I think we should maybe take a step back and look at it a little bit in terms of what does it mean for a movement to occur, and then how do you set up enough exemplars basically of what digital transformation needs to look like. So our basic hypothesis at DIAL is that the only way we're going to actually achieve the SDGs is if there are more examples of digital transformation like Estonia, like Singapore, like India. There's no one model, but there's a really good set of models, and we need to learn from the countries who are already on this path and then help all of us collectively support more of those countries actually achieving digital transformation so that they can add as an exemplar and others can learn from them, and then sort of identify what were the variables that basically made that take place. In our mind, Martin talked a lot about sort of the product side of our work, and we agree, but he also touched on a couple of things, and we sort of just for the sake of mnemonics and to make it easier, have sort of broken it down into like 4 or 5 Ps that we think are pretty critical. So one is you need to have the right product. So you need to have these digital building blocks that are kind of the core infrastructure on top of connectivity and electricity that enable people to be able to build on top of it and basically through a set of APIs be able to tie into them. Digital identity, financial services, data privacy and security, and that stack basically can then open up local innovators to build on top of it. That's a product side, but the product side, as we know, is usually the easier part. Then we tend to look at what are the policy infrastructures that are in place. I was on a call this morning with the DRC, and they've put in place a data privacy law as of November 2020. Right. So in order for them to really use data and use data effectively, safely, and securely, like they're going to need a lot of support on the policy side to basically craft that structure for their digital infrastructure. And so we need a lot of help there. There's a pricing and procurement side. Let's be honest, like procuring for digital and actually pricing it appropriately for many countries and governments and kind of understanding what you should be able to pay and how long it's going to take and what service level agreements you can get. These are things that have been done in the commercial sector for decades, but it's not necessarily well known and understood for digital procurement or the pricing of those products. And that's where the public and private sector have to come together. And then our last P, although there are many more, is really around toward the people. And that's, you talked about it, Malin, is like the capacity is, or sort of the building blocks being about the capacity. I would actually say it's capacity of the multilateral system, it's capacity of the NGO system, it's capacity of the governments themselves, it's capacity of the private sector. We don't all speak the same language. We come from very different models and infrastructure. I know that when I worked in the private sector at Microsoft, and it was like when we talked about going into a country, those conversations were very different than what I did when I led like a health group at an NGO or even the work I do at Dial now. And so that kind of being able to translate between those sectors and build that capacity between people is huge. And I think something that you all should really be applauded for as the ITU, the high level panel, everyone who's working on this is really, it's the process too. How are we actually learning from one another and bringing together these experiences and then building those peer learning experiences that can take place? And there's a lot of work that's been done on that by sector or by groups. I used to run a couple of peer learning networks. They're incredibly powerful, but we're doing them at the small level instead of looking at them at kind of a big macro level of how do governments learn from one another on digital transformation overall. So we'd be really interested in working with a group on how to help enable that.
Wonderful, and I think we have Michael Sung from the from Carbon Blue for your remarks, Michael.
And thank you, Malin. Yeah, a very intriguing talk, and actually brings to mind several things. I'm just going to brainstorm and riff about this a little bit. I got my PhD at the MIT Media Lab, and we were part of a group called the Human Dynamics Group. Okay, and it's about applying machine learning and all sorts of analytical techniques to understand human behavior. And so we studied a lot of from a technical aspect, some of these, effects that you're talking about now, like, for example, the viral spreading, right? How that can be modeled. And then specifically influence, okay? So actually, we came up with a model called the influence model, which was originally looking at how dynamic systems can have nonlinear effects. We were studying specifically how electrical power plants, right, in a sort of in a decentralized grid, can have nonlinear effects to lead to blackouts, right, and how one power station can influence another. But what we did was we took that mathematical construct and we applied it to social networks, okay, and we could now start to look at how one person might influence another person. So in addition to the viral spreading, which I think epidemiological studies, people have done that viral spread quite well. But I think another aspect is the influence of an idea and the spread of that idea, and how one person, bringing in cultural values or social influence on another person might be able to do things. So I think one thing that might be interesting to do is to apply some of our previous knowledge on how to do these modeling And we can start to think about how social networks and influence networks can be used to spread these digital building blocks and things like that. So that's one thing. The other aspect, you talked about is sort of, I think that comes to mind is instead of having this sort of top-down sort of construct, which tends to be this UN kind of things like, hey, how do we build digital economy infrastructure in a nation? How do we get the government involved? And that's great. But one other way, which I think is what you're promoting, is a bottoms up approach, a grassroots approach where people can, sort of in an organic way, be influenced to in also a decentralized way to pop up. And the thing that comes to mind when we're discussing that sort of like mesh networks, right, where you have basically each person can be, if they are incentivized to do so with these digital building blocks, they can be become a node on the network, and then add to the resiliency. And also there's this network effect, right? As more nodes come on, then there's more interconnection, there's more power in the network itself, right? And one key to this, okay, to allow this to happen, is in incentivization. Okay, so it's like, why would I go and spend money on hardware or plug it into my power and have to pay for the power to be a node on this network to allow internet to happen? Well, it's because I could be incentivized, right? Now with digital finance, we could be paid, okay, to become a node on the network, and therefore contribute to the social good while having individual benefits. So there's a lot of interesting models there. As you know, I do a lot of digital finance stuff, right? So another example that comes to mind is when what we call decentralized finance, which has kind of been a very popular thing in this past year. And the idea here is that instead of a very, again, top-down standardized network where you're trying to find liquidity for your digital assets, now we can have a complete decentralized ecosystem where people who want to find, who have value, right, and people who want to, pay for value can do so in a decentralized way and have liquidity and provision and things like that. So I'm mentioning all of this because I think we can tie these things together, right? We can tie this idea of bottoms up grassroots development to give, say, digital building blocks to people, and use digital finance to incentivize people to want to be nodes on this network and grow in an organic, decentralized way. And by doing so, we have this viral spread, okay, to be able to give people these building blocks and then develop a resilient network from the grounds up. So anyway, I think these are some interesting concepts. I would be very interested to explore this. So for example, we've been talking about this African moonshot, right? Maybe it's going to be difficult to get, the UN and, all these big, private sector people to come in and build a bunch of digital infrastructure in the nation. Maybe there's another way to do it from the grounds up, where we can incentivize the local people to be able to build these things in a more organic and ultimately a more resilient way. So anyway, some thoughts.
So thank you very much, Michael. It's Vint. I just want to react a little bit. I'm a huge bottom-up fan, as you might imagine. However, what I have observed in terms of infrastructure is that you do need a certain amount of concentration of capacity in order to make pieces of the infrastructure reliable. We can't really wave our hands too much and say, well, if it's just distributed enough, it will be reliable. I imagine, just to be extreme about this, if everybody said, well, I'll offer up my laptop as a component of the network. The problem we have is that the capacity to maintain that laptop and keep it up to date and to have all the software in it that it needs and enough memory may not be there. And that's why when you see successful pieces of the internet operating, at least at the infrastructure level, there's been a certain amount of concentration of capacity to both pay for the cost of the hardware and to pay for operations and maintenance and the like. So I think we should be a little careful when we paint these distributed pictures to be sure we know what are the characteristics of the distributed components that contribute to their sustainability. So I don't know whether you want to respond to that. We have maybe a moment of extra time.
Yeah, I'll respond to that. You know, the whole mesh network thing is a little bit of a just off the top of my head. Certainly all the practical considerations that you have for creating a specifically network infrastructure for for the internet. We would have to consider different things. I think I've anecdotally worked with a number of mesh network companies that seem to have developed next generation stuff that could provide that resiliency and commoditizing it and things like that. I'd be happy to dig it up and share. We can discuss about that. But I think not beyond that. I think the conversation is not just on say this basic digital economy infrastructure, but just in digital building blocks itself, right? So whether that's digital finance solutions for decentralized finance or different capabilities, right? The idea here is, one, if we can spread it, I think Mei Lin's idea was to spread it more virally, through people rather than through contagion rather than through, say, a centralized ecosystem. And how do you package that? I think ultimately the contribution I like to propose to the audience here is really about how to incentivize that network, right? One, if it's viral because it's an interesting video that works, but if we're talking about digital capacity building and we're talking about digital blocks, then I think we need to package that in a way that makes sense and have that spread in a way that it could be incentivized. So those are the real meat of, I think, what I would like to propose.
So just to a small coda on this, if we're going to use viral spread as the metaphor, it's important to understand that viruses are not alive. And in order for them to spread, they need real functioning cells to go squirt their DNA into. And so by way of analogous reasoning, if we're going to have this sort of viral spread of infrastructure, there has to be sort of a minimum viable element to it. And viability here has many dimensions. We're out of time to have this arm wrestling discussion, so we'll stop there. And Mei Lin, I'm going to let you draw on the newcomer's introduction, because you know the people that are new and I don't. So this is your opportunity to introduce people.
Great. Leng, if you're on still, would you introduce yourself, where you are, and a couple of sentences about what you do?
Yes, just very briefly. Leng, American, born in Singapore, now in Bali for the last year because of COVID. I've been a long-time friend of Mei Lin and collaborator on different projects, not digital, a lot having to do with youth leadership in Southeast Asia, and currently working with her and Michael on a particular project, which I think in time she will share. By training, I'm a theologian. By occupation, I do leadership development. And I'm really, really so honored and humbled to be learning so much. Thank you.
Well, Leng is one of these rare birds that has both a Master's of Divinity and an MBA from Harvard. I'm not sure if anybody else has ever done that.
Mei Lin, it's obvious that this is how you monetize religion.
We are privileged to have Doc Searls on. Doc, would you like to just say a few words, and Joyce as well? Doc and Joyce Searls. Maybe we don't have them. We can't hear you.
No, you do. You have us.
Good.
Sorry, we're actually both on. But we're rushed because we're moving between locations. So we hauled a lot of gear in yesterday and still setting up. Yeah, so we're both, along with Nitin, by the way, on the board of Customer Commons, and which is the one and only spinoff of Project VRM at the Berkman Center, now the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard, and which I still run there, and it has an active member list of about, I think it's 567 people, and we also, with Customer Commons, we're working on tools and services that will restore the balance of power between people and the organizations that serve them, starting with business. And the idea is to crank up agency on the individual side. And we have a couple of projects in the works, which I don't want to say too much about because I don't want to get people salivating too much, but we're very excited about them, and we're going to show them off, demo them at as far as they're developed at VRM Day, which is the day before IIW, and then we're going to talk about them throughout IIW, which is the Internet Identity Workshop. It's our 32nd, I think. They usually take place at the Computer History Museum in Silicon Valley. However, they're taking place this one, the last 3 of them, on the internet. We'll be on a system there. So, and I encourage people to show up for that. That's if you go to iiworkshop.org, that's the, and I'll put it in the chat. That's the short link for it. And so that's the main thing that's occupying us right now.
Thank you, Doc. I think everybody else has been a long time participant except Ray Wang, who was our speaker, and he was so into the content he didn't get a chance to introduce himself. So Ray, please. Would you like to say a few words about where you are and what you do? Maybe not.
He's still muted. By the way, I have a new slide. You know how sometimes you'll put these things up. I have a new one. This is for viral conferences. So I think Ray may not have heard us invite him to introduce himself. So I think maybe we should move on. And if he seems to come back to attention, we'll give him a chance to do that. I think our next speaker is Anthony Randall, speaking about Planet Home. So,
I'm not sure he's on yet. He was going to join at noon.
Let's do one other thing. Michael Sung has his hand up, but it might have been unintentional. Michael, did you want to say something?
No, I think I was just handing my hand out from before. No, sorry about that. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. I keep thinking somebody is going to put another little icon in here. Instead of Ray's hand, it'll be Ray's finger. But okay.
Micah Lucan has her hand up. So Micah, please.
Thank you very much, Maylin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to go back to your wonderful presentation and your comparison to, and I think it was you, the adoption of the, networking and later on the internet through the, after its invention through the academic community. And what I was trying to get at is that the academic community existed, so a network was there. So if you want to get a contagion out, on which network is this contagion, quote unquote, digital literacy or whichever one we talk about, going to spread? So there has to be an infrastructure there in order to be able to spread, like as with a virus, like it's people. But what is that network? And I think maybe we should have a little thought about that, what that might be.
So, Micah, it's Vint. You're quite right about this. The academic community existed, and so it formed a kind of scaffolding for internet to spread, and its predecessor, ARPANET, for that matter.
Right.
And in a sense, the spread of ARPANET acted as a scaffolding for the spread of internet.
Mm-hmm.
There are other pieces of the scaffolding in addition to the individuals, the people involved, and that was the capacity to pay for the cost of building the system. And so many governments undertook to pay for academic networks on the grounds that those networks would produce value. in terms of accelerated research results and collaboration across communities. So you're quite right that if we don't have a medium through which the virus can spread, we won't achieve the result that we're after.
And I think there was another goal at that point, and that was the tantalizing opportunity to communicate faster or more efficiently for military purposes. So the investment by government, had another goal rather than like, a benefit to humanity type goal.
Good points. We have a few minutes if others have comments they'd like to make.
I'd like to respond to Micah's comment. There's some natural networks that are out there, but the one that's really quite core to this group, we focused on both digital capacity building as well as the global connectivity. Those are the 2 points of focus for our digital cooperation and diplomacy network. And under global connectivity is GIGA, which is the schools connectivity project that the UN has launched. And with the COVID situation, we within the People-Centered Internet really raised the flag about the need to think about how schools are connected and how learners are connected. And so schools are natural hubs for their community. They've got the children, they've got the parents, there's the teachers, there's also the community that supports the school in terms of demand and supply around it. So in my mind, I saw a sort of natural expansion of the NRENs, the National Research and Education Networks, to in fact this networks of schools that were pipelines of candidates that would be going towards the universities. So that was my thought. And Alex Wong from the ITU, who is the GIGA lead, please, Alex, speak up.
Hello, Mei Ling. Hello, everyone. So I had promised several months ago we were going to be looking at NRENs and other innovative ways to run and manage a connectivity network. So I'll have news to report back to this group in a couple months, Mei Ling. Actually, for those of you that remember the Internet for All project, our good friends from Boston Consulting Group, Michael Wilms and crew, are going to help us think through different school connectivity operating models. So how can a country operate in a sustainable manner a connectivity operating model using schools as an example, as a node, but this could apply in general to any national connectivity infrastructure model. So we will have something to report back to this group in a couple months' time. Thanks.
So, Alex, it's Vint. I'm really glad to hear that. One thing I would point out is the successful NRENs have institutions built around them, in effect, or they have institutions are created in order to run the NREN. And it's, for example, in Uganda, it's RENU. Here in the US, it's a variety of state level and national level institutions that take responsibility for operations. The schools have responsibility for local connectivity, but not necessarily for operating substantial infrastructure, national level or international infrastructure. So once again, you need minimum viable capacity in order to make these things sustainable.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, Mei Ling, it's the schedule that I have says that Anthony Randall is next at noon, but I'm not sure that he's joined us.
That's
I don't
right.
see him.
He hasn't.
Well,
we've got
anything. I don't see Robert Opp on either.
Hannah Wang is on, and so she's sort of coordinating to get him on. I am curious if Matthew Parron or Joseph Knoll have comments to make while we're waiting for Anthony to come forward.
Sure, and lots of comments from my side. What what I still see is connectivity is still treated too much as a vertical issue and not as the enabling issue. So I reached out to Martin to actually ask, hey, what is the module which we could eventually use for school connectivity, where we put the right services on for the schools and to show the value of the internet for the schools, and then let that one grow into a governmental portal. Because quite often I see that the governmental portal needs small success stories, like what we currently do in Tanzania and Ethiopia.
Thank you, Joseph. I think my own concept is very, very much along those lines. While the NRENs were institutions, they've developed products and services that made them more valuable. And so I imagine that the NREN equivalent will happen with schools. And they seem to be a natural place, especially related to education. Matthew Perrin from Salesforce, I wondered if you had any comments.
I think my comments for this group are really going back to earlier what Nitin was talking about, and then second what Michael was discussing. That's kind of where the focus of a lot of our attention has been. One, how do you understand which types of data can be commingled in order to like change how you make investment decisions? It's something we've been thinking a lot about in the Salesforce domain of how do we bring various types of data into the Salesforce platform to actually make decisions. So I think there's some more information that I'd like to speak with you, Mei Ling and Nitin, about separately about like how that would actually work when you kind of move it forward. And then I think kind of thinking about what Michael was talking about, the grassroots versus the top-down kind of approach to encouraging connectivity and like different types of proposals. I think what we've seen more recently has been a lot of the larger companies who are operating in the space don't actually see the circumstances for them to make investment decisions change until they have higher level regulatory kind of frameworks changing themselves, which then changes their profit calculations and their investment calculations. So I think it really turns into an environment where private sector companies increasingly have to wait on the sidelines to make these decisions that they perhaps would want to, but being driven by the market, they have to wait until regulatory entities, whether they're IGO entities or national entities or regulatory entities generally, until they make a change, which then changes the investment calculations that they are ultimately going to make in order to like drive their business forward. So that is something that I think when we talk about like what's the top-down versus the bottom-up approach to encouraging connectivity, I think it really has to be a lot of governments or regulators who are looking after the public good within their own space as the thing that then changes the profit calculations or the investment calculations of a lot of these other tech companies globally, whether that's Google in Vince's case or Salesforce in my case, in terms of how we are going to market abroad.
So it's Vint. I really want to emphasize a point that Matthew is making, and that's that things don't happen until it's possible for them to happen. And so there are a set of conditions that have to be satisfied for a lot of the actions that we're all looking for in order to make them feasible. And that includes things like incentives, it may be regulatory frameworks, it may be investment, it may be other capacities that have to be built up before the system is ready to adopt a new change or an additional expansion. So I've noticed Robert Opp has arrived, but I don't think that Anthony Randall has arrived yet. So I wonder if we could switch and ask Robert to make his presentation. Robert, are you comfortable with that? You're muted right now. There we go. You're not anymore.
Yeah, absolutely fine. I will. I'm going to leave my video. Hear me.
Robert, you're breaking up very badly, so I don't know whether you have an access capacity problem or something.
Yeah, I'm having some bandwidth issues. Give me 1 minute Vint? I
Well,
apologize for this.
Actually, it's working okay for the moment. If you want to wing it for a bit, let's see if it works.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Please cut me off if it's going to break up. I'll try to share my screen. Okay. Are you still hearing and seeing the screen, Vint?
We're hearing you, and we are about to see your screen.
Okay. Great. Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to be with you again. And today I was asked to present just a little bit about UNDP's work in terms of digital transformation support for our government partners. So I'm going to cover about 6 quick slides. It should take 7 minutes or something like that. So just to put a little bit of context, UNDP, you know, we've been speaking to this group about different pieces of our work together with ITU and other partners. This one I'm going to focus a little bit on UNDP's work supporting our partners, and that's part of our digital strategy, which was created in 2019. It's not created out of nothing. UNDP has been supporting digital work and ICT-based work with governments for a number of years, but the strategy was something that we put in place to really recognize that the organization itself needs to shift and become more agile in mindset and practice around digital, so that we're able to be increasingly and still relevant to our government partners and the challenges that they have. And we kicked off the digital transformation of UNDP, but at the same time, it was about 6 months after the implementation formally started, the COVID acceleration hit in terms of digital acceleration related to COVID. We saw just a massive response coming out of our country network. UNDP is present in about 107 countries. And so we saw lots of different examples of digital responses to COVID that were emerging out of our countries. But interesting thing is something that is not unique to UNDP, but we know a number of other partners are headed in this direction. There is a big strategic shift from digital as specific individual solutions. In other words, the kind of intervening on one thing, you're going to build an app platform or a data platform or something like that, and moving into a more strategic approach. And we really saw that as governments were faced with the challenges of COVID, and as they adopted more digital transformation or digital responses, there was a greater interest in the strategic look at how governments can make a move to achieve digital transformation across an entire society. And so at UNDP, we have been building what we're calling essentially a framework or a reference model of what a whole of society inclusive digital transformation would look like. And the most important word I just used there was inclusive. And that's because UNDP is a human development organization. We are not a tech company. And so our objective in supporting our government partners with digital transformation work is not to enter the tech build space in any way. It's rather to help advise governments on how to adopt digital and leverage digital for the overall purpose of human development in their countries. And so the reference model that you see here has kind of the layers that you would expect. So kind of your ambition layer, your strategy layer, your main pillars, sectors, and the foundations.
Robert, it's Vint. If you right now we're only seeing your title slide. You may need to click on something in order to show us the next slide.
Okay. Are you still hearing me okay, though?
Yes, we can hear you okay. We just can't see the next slide.
I have been moving the slides.
You need to, well, we're seeing the first slide. I wonder if you could click on presentation mode. Oops.
Yes, well. Let me try it again. I apologize. I've been advancing my slides and talking early in the void, so I apologize for that. Let me try again.
While you're doing that, Alex, you probably don't need to have your hand up unless you actually want to say something. So you could click on, there you go.
Vint, are you seeing a full frame view or the just the, sort of the regular PowerPoint view?
Right now, we're seeing what we would like, I think, is this is the editing view, what we're seeing right now. And so what you want to do is click on what would normally be a presentation down in the lower right there.
Exactly. And this is what I've been trying to get.
It's not
it's not hitting full frame. I can see it on my screen. I apologize for that. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me just check the most important slide.
Robert, it's coming across that you have two screens. So one screen is the presentation screen and one screen is the note screen. That's why you see it advancing on your side, but we don't see it advancing on our side because we're looking at the notes and editing screen.
Oh, thanks.
My apologies. I'm sorry for this, everybody. I'll ask my colleague Hannah to share her slides, and I need to look at my display mode and get that sorted out. So sorry for that.
No problem. We're all learning.
Okay.
Actually,
so Hannah will just...
while they're sorting it out, I just wanted to say that Anthony Randall is now on.
Okay, well, let's see how quickly Robert can get sorted.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Anthony.
Hi, welcome.
Hang on just a second, Anthony. We're halfway through Robert Opp's presentation, but he ran into some problems with slide presentation. So Hannah has the slides up now, and we need for Hannah to go to wherever it is Robert wants her to go.
Yeah, exactly. So Hannah, can you just advance to the first framework slide, please?
We're at the...
Sorry, I had all these... sorry about this, Vin. I had all these pretty slides. I thought you were seeing them all.
No, that's why I interrupted. I figured you were assuming something. Okay, what we
Can
have...
you guys see the right screen now?
Yes, we're seeing a work in progress, building a stack from foundations at the bottom to inclusive whole of society at the top.
Exactly. Okay, so this really is the most important slide because I was talking about how UNDP is moving from a kind of ad hoc response mode into a whole of society digital transformation support for our partners, and this slide represents the kind of the reference model that we've created for this. And so what I was mentioning is you see the kind of regular things here, and the strategy and ambition, some basic pillars around infrastructure, regulation, government, people, skills, and so on. Then you have the different sectors across society, and then some foundational components. But the most important for us, the most important layer is where it's principles for digital inclusion. And this is something that we've been developing. This is why UNDP as a human development organization is working in this space. And how we support governments is by speaking with them on a strategic dialogue basis to say, as you consider implementing digital approaches across different parts, consider that there are adjacent issues and other parts of an overall picture that you will want to consider in terms of sequencing, in terms of desire for including all elements of society, and so on. Hannah, just advance the next one, please. And so when you take down a level, you see we built out more detail in all of this. We've identified these 5 principles for digital inclusion: availability, accessibility, adoption, awareness, and protection. We have deployed this reference model fully with about 3 or 4 country partners so far. It's still marked draft because we're still building on it, and when we come into contact with a lot of what others are doing. So, for example, the building blocks reference architecture work that ITU, DIAL, GIZ, and others are doing. We've been enormously influenced by DIAL's work in this space, and they've actively helped us put this together. So really, this is kind of something we're still building out, and hope that it's something that can become useful to the community. Next one. And I'll end on this slide, but this is just to say that framework becomes part of an overall comprehensive offer that UNDP wants to create and offer to our partners. In other words, the digital transformation work, we have an accompanying digital readiness tool that we've developed and are also using this time. We also have some cross-cutting work, capacity building initiatives that we're working on with ITU, some digital public goods work that we work on with Digital Public Goods Alliance and Dial, some ethics and technology research and misinformation work that we're doing. And then those are the overarching and cross-cutting areas. And then UNDP's kind of regular service lines in terms of our thematic teams, like the governance team, health team, finance team, and so on, are all building in digital elements for digital enablement as well. So overall, this is the direction that UNDP and its digital transformation are headed from a programmatic point of view, where we will be able to offer a fairly comprehensive support package to countries who ask for support. And just to end, it's really, I'll come back to the main point here, which is that, we're not a technology company. We need to bring in this element of how do governments, how do societies really work to adopt digital in the most inclusive and beneficial manner possible. And that takes a lot of partnerships as well. So it's not just UNDP alone working with government, it's across the UN system, but it's much farther beyond that in terms of civil society, both locally and globally, academic think tanks, and many tech company partnerships that we have with Google, Amazon, many others. So let me leave it there. I hope that's interesting for you and the people that are joined the call today, and thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Robert, and thanks for overcoming the technical challenges. It's very clear that the tapestry that we're trying to weave has many threads, and it's clear from what the UNDP has chosen to adopt that you recognize that many different components have to be woven together to achieve success. And we have 10 minutes available now for Anthony Randall. So Anthony, the floor is now yours.
Well, good morning, everybody. I have to apologize in advance for being a little bit disorganized too. I'm going to try to share some slides, but I'm actually not a Google guy. I guess I got so used to Zoom. So let me see. And Maylin, I'm sorry I didn't send it to you directly, but I'm going to try and be bold here, and I'm going to try and share something. Present now. Well, I'm Anthony Randall, and I formed a company called Planet Home.
Tony, if you think that you're presenting, you may be, but we can't see the slides, which means that
I'm very aware of that, actually. I'm going to talk.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
I'm going to talk whilst trying to present, so you guys don't have to sit and look at thin air. So I'm going to keep my presentation short, but basically, as I get it up, I'm Anthony Randall. I founded a company called Planet Home. So I'll give you a quick brief history. I worked in the entertainment space for a very long time at a very high level. Most of my job was delivering large-scale festivals, concerts, live TV shows like the Grammys. A lot of my work was operations and logistics side for many years in the engineering side. I actually started out as an engineer. I went to school for engineering, but I moved over more into the management space through my career. But the reason why I started that career was in 1985, I was inspired very much by Live Aid. And I was always on this quest to try to find how we could have a more equitable world. And I was unable to really kind of sort of shape my career into doing more of the work I wanted to do. And in 2007, you guys may remember Live Earth that came out. And we performed in London, 60,000 people for Al Gore and Tony Wall. And we really imagined that like this big movement might make some change and get us a bit more focused on these planetary issues. And it didn't really transpire that way. And a gentleman called Paul Hawken, who now has the Drawdown, also started on a journey in 2007 to try to shape a platform for bringing all these organizations together. I was on the periphery. I was very much on the fringes at that point and just following along. And by 2012, most of them organizations had kind of not really transpired into action and not really getting much done. One of my now co-pilots on this project, a gentleman by the name of Stephen Kotler, I'd written a book in 2012 called Abundance, and another one that followed called Bold with a gentleman called Peter Diamandis. And the book was really focused on exponential technology and solutions. And one of the discoveries that we made between 2012 and 2016 when we launched Planet Home was that the technology space and the environmental space, there was this big sort of blind spot. And we could see that solutions existed. And we could see that we just had choices to make, but we couldn't see them choices being made. So me and my partner, Gabrielle Hull, launched Planet Home. And our first challenge was to try to find a way to communicate at scale, sort of the challenges that we had and the solutions that we might find. And so we built a framework called the Planet Home Taxonomy Framework. And that took a while to build, and it enabled us to go into what we call our areas and sectors. So on the framework, we have areas, and they go eat, make, move, and live. And under each area, we have sectors. So under eat, we will have food production security. We will have land stewardship. We will have ocean stewardship, and we will have, say, health and wellness. What that enabled us to do was really organize these solutions into what we call a wheel of opportunity. And so that was the first phase, like, okay, can we organize these things so that we can take the complex part away and simplify the front end communication part? So after some heavy sort of taxonomy work, we did that, and we started to build some media really around the Eat, Make, Move, Live framework. And we launched in 2019 a test pilot project at the Palace of Fine Arts. We took a selection of what we call subject matter experts from around our world of Planet Home Index. And we married them with some media and entertainment folks. And then we married that with actual companies with real innovational solutions. And if you go to the Planet Home website, you'll see what that looks like. The reason for that was I was very interested in the sort of front end of the platform looking like an interests and behaviors platform, so that the consumer themselves wouldn't really see anything other than the bits they needed to see. You know, if it's a complex system and you're running a very linear, very busy life, then most people can't get into the complex systems of biodiversity. They can't get down to things like mega linkages, which are, you know, if you chop out a big forest and put a ski slope, or you chop out an area for logging, what you're really doing is destroying the eco-service system. And so because we've been destroying our eco-service systems, and if our eco-service systems collapse, we will have a traumatic challenge on top of climate. We wanted to take that away. We wanted to take the stress level away. We wanted to change the tone. We didn't want to tell people the world was dying. We wanted to show them the opportunity to fix it. So we built another layer called interest and behaviors on the front end. And so now the platform taxonomy sort of starts at the top of the funnel, which is interest and behaviors. It then goes to Eat, Make, Move, Live, and then it goes into areas and sectors. What we were able to then do was what we originally started out to do with the areas and sectors, and I think this is where me and Lena have been talking a lot, is, you know, the taxonomy is really industries. So 16 sectors of industries that are net positive to the planet, that are all new and are starting to, circular economies is a new conversation in the last 15 years and is now really exciting and is growing year on year. And the regenerative movement is moving and is becoming a real thing, and regenerative farming is now really tangible. We're starting to see signs that we're starting to understand vertical farming better. We're starting to get to unit metrics. We now know what it costs us to, you know, have a unit metrics for farming with lights versus, you know, natural light from the sun versus tungsten lighting that we build in virtual farms. So what we were able to start doing was fostering these relationships between these industries to try to help fund them and help them along. So you can really think about Planet Home as the front end of this being more like a media platform that's baked into stories and actions. So we have an actions part where people can take daily actions. And the back-end insights platform is more of a industry-to-industry, peer-to-peer business platform where people that are building new businesses that are innovational for the planet can come together, foster relationships, support one another, and grow these new businesses that we'll need in the future. I haven't been unfortunate being able to share the presentation this morning, so I hope that that was articulate enough. We do have a beta test of the platform, which we're not sharing right now, but we finished that in December, and we were very happy, and in fact more than happy with the beta test. And we're getting ready to ramp up the engineering team again to finish V1 by May 1. And then we will get back to large-scale media communications by October this year. So we did a program. We had 10,000 people come to the Palace of Fine Arts in 2019. We had 200 speakers, guests, creators, and artists that came together to see if we could try this theory of communication on one end, interests, actions with intelligence of business leaders, and it worked really well. So you'll start to see that shape up this year. And that's a little bit of introduction about Planet Home.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much. Do you go by Anthony or Tony?
I go by Anthony or Randall. So unfortunately, in America, Randall seems to be quite a strong first name. So I have been adopting both names over the last 20 years, actually. But Anthony with no H and Tony.
All right. Well, and first of all, thank you, Anthony. One thing I would observe is that the impresario in you has shown through in this presentation, especially with the scale of the event that you were just describing. I was struck as I listened to what you were saying, especially when you mentioned vertical farming and artificial light. I'm thinking more and more about the core role of electricity in everything that we've been talking about. I mean, nothing works without it, at least in the space that we've been talking about. And so there are some really important issues here. One is, of course, renewable generation, wherever we can get away with it. And the other one, which is as yet still an uncracked nut, is storage at scale and cost. Because if we have renewables that don't generate electricity all the time when we need it, we need to store it when we can generate it and use it when it isn't generable. Today, the storage technologies are simply not yet at scale sufficient to do it. Lithium ion is probably not the answer. So I bring that up because it's such a crucial element of everything else. And we tend to sometimes forget about it in places where electricity is generally reliable. But I guarantee you there are plenty of places in the world where it isn't. And so even while we're thinking about all the applications of online digital technology and everything else, let us not forget that without electricity, none of this works.
I could add a bit to that if you like, Vin. I could add some interesting facts for you on that.
You have exactly 1 minute to do it. Go for it.
I'll do it in less than that. I'll do it in 2 seconds. It's only 8 minutes to the sun, right? And we actually have enough sun to power the entire planet. Unfortunately, we can't because of the politics that go into scaling up our solar companies. There you go.
Well, physics gets in the way too. I mean, transferring electricity from one place to another is not a non-trivial exercise. And anyone
we'll pick it up another time. We can definitely have that one. That's some interesting.
I mean, you know, if you look at Texas in the last few months, you could see what happens if you don't build a resilient grid.
Well, we will have a politics conversation over time around that. But what I'd like to do is just add one last thing, which is I wanted to just say actually this morning, not to just add to this, that GHD has been an amazing resource of information and learning for me. I'm very new to this space, only a few years in it, so I feel like a first grader when I come to these meetings. Obviously, I had a illustrious career in one space that have now moved into another. So I just want to take a second to really thank everyone at GHD and to Vin and to Mei Lin for bringing us all together, because without these group meetings, without this intelligence sharing, like, we cannot collaborate and we cannot change. So I just want to take a second to thank you guys for allowing me to be a small part of this sand in this desert.
Well, what you're expressing is what all of us know, which is that Mei Lin is the grand connector. She knows everybody and insists on plugging everybody together, especially if she's like the Tinker Toy person who says, gee, these two things have never been plugged together. Let's see what happens. So we thank you, Mei Lin, for organizing this session. Perhaps we'll give you the last word and then we'll wrap up on time.
Thank you, Vint, and thank you all for being part of this. Some of you have seen that this meeting has been a little bit more chaotic, and I just want to say a word of memory to my mother who passed away about a week ago. And so I've been here in Singapore and quite distracted. and thank you all for your tolerance. But I would like to say a couple of words about her. She really was somebody who did not accept that she deserved adversity. She was born, her father died before she was born. Her mother died when she was 9. That means she was an orphan at 9 years old. Her brother said that it wasn't worth educating her. But so she just got a job and earned enough money to send herself to New Zealand to study social work, to become the help that she had needed growing up. And I think that's really what I've inherited from her, is that as I worked in technology, I really felt stuck. I was at Oracle. We were in a lot of trouble because we had the what is software is quite different accounting-wise than physical products. And in my mid-30s, I felt, I need help. I want to talk to somebody. I don't know what's going on. And at that point, I swore I would become the help that I needed. And I now am the help that I needed so many years ago. And that's the whole genesis of the Global Help Desk, is that we are the cavalry. Don't wait. But that's the migrant story that I came out of, is that we have to help ourselves, and we can help ourselves. My mother helped herself, and she taught me how to help myself. So thank you all for being part of this meeting, and see you next month.
Indeed, we'll see you on the net in between and on the net next month as well. Thanks, Maylin. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.